Hi, Professor Brewer. My name is Andrew Richards, and this is my college success portfolio. This is the first PowerPoint I have done in about 20 years, and that is primarily the reason why I chose to do this project in PowerPoint. I feel like getting used to presentation technology and getting comfortable with it will only help me in the future. So I may as well start learning now. I chose the video recording aspect of it because I thought, if I'm going to be presenting as a teacher, I should get used to presenting ideas on camera. It's not quite the same as an in-person lecture or presentation, I know, but I think the idea of imparting information verbally is similar. I think. The first section I will be presenting on is my personal exploration. I'm going to try to answer the question, who am I? I'm going to try to answer what are my strengths, what are my values, and finally I'll look at my soft skills. My top strengths, according to the VIA Institute on Character, were judgment, curiosity, love of learning, social intelligence, and forgiveness. Over on the right of the screen shows the entire list of VIA character strengths, and as you can see, there are 6 different categories of character strength. So I think that the fact that 3 of the top 5 strengths come from the wisdom category kind of shines a light on the type of personality I have, or at least I think I have. So I frequently, for judgment, I frequently do not have opinions on subjects that my friends and people close to me think I should because it's, the news topic of the day or it's seemingly pertinent at the moment. And a lot of times people take that as not caring. But the reason is because I do not wish to give my opinion on something I have not first researched and deeply considered. I think the ability to say I don't know or I'm not sure is incredibly important, and I think a lot of that goes back to judgment. I think curiosity and love of learning are grouped together in my mind. I don't know if I'm curious because I love learning or if I love learning because I'm curious. I've always been this way ever since I was a little kid. My mother loves to tell the story of how I memorized the presidents in order when I was 5 years old because of this one book I loved looking at. Frankly, I have no idea if it's true or not at this point because I can't recite the presidents in order now. But I guess the point is I've always loved learning about new things. There are definitely some caveats to that. For example, I don't know anything about motor vehicle maintenance and I do not have any interest in learning about it. However, if it's anything in the field of traditional academia, I am likely going to be very interested in it. Social intelligence, I definitely think is a strength of mine. However, I will admit that a lot of that comes from my background in theater and acting. Oftentimes in social situations like a party or a wedding, I will kind of act the part of enthusiastic guest when a lot of times I would really rather be somewhere else. I am pretty good at reflecting the appropriate emotions at the appropriate times and holding back on reflecting negative emotions like anger or frustration. This is important to me because, in my opinion, as an academic or in an academic or professional environment, if you don't like something and you are able to convey that in a professional and appropriate way, then you're much more likely to fix your issue than if you're the type of person that wears their emotions on their sleeve, so to speak. Forgiveness, I think, is a strength, although some people may say that at some point it definitely becomes a weakness as well. I have let people take advantage of me to an extent over the years, less so the older I get, but I am someone that doesn't hold on to anger or frustration for a long time. I'm good at moving on from negative experiences, and I'm good at partitioning my mind. That's how I say it anyway. So I don't think about past negative experiences. I always remind myself, and this is, of course, something easier said than done, that I can only move forward in life. There is no time machine that I know of, at least, where I can go back in time and fix things that were done to me or things that I did that I wish I hadn't. So dwelling on it creates nothing positive for the future. That is the rundown of my strengths. My top values are competitiveness, community, efficiency, exploration, and self-reliance. I chose to show the iceberg concept of culture in relation to my values because I think Culture and values are really intertwined. What I have chosen to value in my life is highly dependent upon the culture I grew up in, both on a micro level and in a macro sense, the state and country I grew up in. I'm not sure that my list of strengths would necessarily be any different if I grew up in different living conditions or in a different country, but I am pretty confident that my list of values would look a lot different. I wrote about my values in some detail in the strengths discussion post during week 3. One of the things I noted in that discussion were that my core values are not always a positive influence on me, specifically that of self-reliance, which is a very American value. Rugged individualism, I believe, is the term most closely related to self-reliance in American culture. I have had to learn over the years that it is okay to ask for help. There is nothing inherently shameful about it. Competitiveness, I think, comes from playing team sports and being relatively good at it when I was a kid. I enjoy all sorts of competition, though. Jeopardy is pretty much the only TV show I watch nowadays, and Trivial Pursuit was my favorite game when I was a kid. So, it's not just athletic sports, all sorts of competition I like. Efficiency is something I pride myself on. I like making lists. I like organizing my time. I like making sure I'm not wasting time. I've not always been like this, but about 6.5 years ago, my father-in-law had a major stroke and severely handicapped him, and it made me realize that time and good health is not a given in this life. It is not a guarantee, and I want to waste as little of it as possible doing things that aren't accomplishing something that is important to me or my family. It's not always a serious thing I want to accomplish. For example, I have lists of movies I want to watch, I have lists of books I want to read, games I want to play, and accomplishing these goals in many ways is as important to me as accomplishing serious tasks. I just like preparing my time in advance, so I'm not trying to figure out what to do next. I like feeling like a contributing part of the community. I mentioned in the strength discussion post that going back to college and joining a community of learners is a very welcoming and comforting experience, and I still feel that way. I don't have any classes on campus this term, though I do have one next term, and I'm excited for that one. It's math for elementary education with Professor Rasmussen. Even though I haven't had any classes on campus yet, the times I have been to both Fort Silicon and Puyallup campuses have been very relaxing and invigorating experiences. There really isn't a comparable feeling in my experience to that of being a student on a college campus. It is a very warm, fulfilling experience. Exploration, I can link back to curiosity, love of learning in my VIA strengths list. I love exploring new territory, both literally in the physical space and in terms of new ideas and knowledge. I love traveling, visiting new places, learning new things, and experiencing new ideas. Soft skills. The soft skills I chose are critical thinking, time management, problem solving, communication, and emotional intelligence. Critical thinking relates to my VIA strength of judgment. It also relates to my West compass point from the week 8 teamwork assignment. I love thinking about things deeply. I love details. I love asking questions. I love making 99.999% sure that I am making the correct decision before I do something. I don't know if you've ever seen a show called The Good Place, but there is a character named Chidi on the show who thinks about his decisions to the point where he can't ever make a decision. And while I'm not that hamstrung by choice, I definitely do fall prey to overthinking things from time to time. Time management relates back to my value of efficiency. I am, for the most part, very good with time management. I am a stickler for being early to events, meetings, work, finishing projects on time, anything where someone else's own time management is dependent on my own time management. Probably this stems from a deep fear of inconveniencing others, which, that connects to forgiveness and social intelligence, all of these interwoven mental threads. The one thing involving time management where I'm weak in, ironically, is when I am critically thinking about an idea or decision. If I'm deep in thought, I tend to lose focus on the time management aspect of a task. Problem solving and critical thinking, I think, definitely go hand in hand. I actually attribute a lot of my problem solving ability to playing video games as a kid in the 90s. Nowadays, you can use Google or any search engine to pretty quickly find the solution to many problems, which I think is a net good thing. However, one of the things I think lost to some extent in the internet era are the instances in which you have to attempt to figure things out on your own. I definitely attribute some skills of mine related to problem solving, such as persistence and patience, to being stuck in games like Zelda as a kid and having to figure out the next part of the puzzle, so to speak. So it wasn't just spelled out for me what to do. I've also loved math and solving equations since I was a kid, so it's also something I just inherently enjoy doing as well. Communication and emotional intelligence, they are very interconnected, I think, as well as connected to my VIA strengths of social intelligence and forgiveness. I'm good at communicating with others as well as listening to others, thinking about what they said, and responding to them in a way which shows I was actually listening. Emotional intelligence is certainly a skill that I've gained over time rather than been born with. Looking back at some of the emotional choices I made as a teenager and young adult, there are definitely instances which I would call embarrassing or cringeworthy. I remember reading relatively recently a comment someone wrote about emotional intelligence and growth, and they framed looking back at past embarrassing events as proof of emotional growth and maturation, as the very fact you feel embarrassed or ashamed of the event is self-recognition that you made a poor choice and are less likely to make a choice like that again in the future. Looking at my strengths, values, and soft skills, who am I? Well, I'm a thinker. I'm a problem solver. I'm a lifelong learner. I value my time. I'm doing my very best every day to grow a little on a social emotional level. That is how I would define myself, at least at the present time. In this second section, I'm going to explore two career options and answer the questions: what jobs am I interested in? Why am I interested in these jobs? What do these jobs look like? And how much do these jobs pay? Now, I will tell you, I already know which job I am going for. And so my first job presentation will be on the job that I am deeply focused on gaining. But I did, the second job I chose is also one that I have always had interest in. It's kind of more like a fun experiment rather than something I'm seriously pursuing. But I chose it just just to check it out because I really like it. Finally, I will compare both jobs as they relate to the current cost of living in the Tacoma metro area, which is kind of crazy. The first career I chose was that of middle school teacher. This is the career I am aspiring to, specifically math teacher, and I focused my degree plan and eventual transfer upon. Even more specifically, no, I just said it. My current goal is to become a middle school math teacher. In Washington State especially, becoming a teacher requires a lot of work. You need a bachelor's degree minimum, although I have learned from my intro to education class that approximately 2/3 of K-12 teachers have master's degrees, so bachelor's really is just the beginning of learning for a teacher. You need to complete a teacher training program, a student teacher internship, much of which is part of the education program at the 4-year university where you're going to major in education. You also need to pass a state licensing exam as well. One of the things I learned while researching becoming a teacher in Washington State is that the requirements in Washington are so robust that once you obtain a license in Washington, obtaining one in other states in the country is a relatively simple task. Much of the time, the only thing in other states, once you have a Washington State license, that you need to get a license is just pass a test, and they'll pretty much give you a license. So I think that's pretty cool. The entry wage, median wage, and experienced wage in Washington State are all quite good in my opinion, although I know from personal experience that there is a huge variance in pay from district to district, even accounting for having the same degree, experience, and credential levels. I know this because my mom happens to be a high school teacher. And a few years ago, she moved from the OMAC school district in eastern Washington to the Federal Way school district. And her pay for doing pretty much the exact same job with the exact same degree level and experience level went from about $80,000 to $90,000 to $120,000 to $130,000. So I am aware, looking at this information, that while the average experienced wage is a bit over $100,000, much of it really boils down to where you end up teaching regionally. In Washington, the job growth for this career is very good, and the number of job openings is above average, which, of course, is always a great thing. You never want the job growth in the field you are interested in to be poor. Now, to answer the question, why does this job interest me, I looked at and listed some of the job tasks that interest me and that I am confident I will enjoy doing. The idea of teaching students math quite excites me. If you take a look at the equation of the whiteboard in the picture, it looks quite daunting. If you haven't learned polynomial multiplication yet, even the name polynomial, is a bit scary. However, all the same basic rules of multiplication apply with polynomial multiplication. You have to learn a couple of new rules involving exponents, but other than that, it is doing the same thing you did in elementary school with multiplication tables, just with a couple of extra symbols or letters or whatever you want to call them involved. I really can't wait to have the opportunity to create and build a math class that relates more complex mathematical ideas back to fundamental algebra, building blocks of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, almost anything, no matter how scary it looks in algebraic math, just goes back to those four building blocks. Another reason I want to become a math teacher involves helping children who need help, not just with math, but with being heard and listened to, and to feel like there is a grown-up in their life that they can rely on if they need help. I am incredibly lucky to have come from a relatively stable home environment. My parents are divorced, but they stayed friendly, and I have always felt like I had someone around who loved me growing up. That is unfortunately not the case for every child. Not every child gets that experience, and sometimes it just takes one teacher listening to them and being around and being present in their life to make far more difference than any kind of teaching or learning math ever could. So I am painfully aware that many middle school age children need social emotional support and learning far more than they just need to learn algebra. The shortened version of why this job interests me is I want to teach kids math in a way that increases their chances of wanting to pursue more math, but I also just want to help kids in general as well. The second job I chose, mostly for fun, but also because I did work in a library when I was younger, is librarian. Librarians are awesome. I remember you commenting in an earlier assignment that you would have been a librarian yourself if you had better guidance in college. So I know you're going to agree with me that librarians are awesome. To be a librarian, you have to pretty much have a master's degree in library and information science, though I believe there are some caveats to that. I think if, for example, you want to be an elementary school librarian, you can have a bachelor's in education and take some library and information science classes and accomplish that goal, for example. The salary in Washington State is pretty similar to that of a teacher, pretty good in my opinion. They didn't actually have Washington State specific employment and outlook data for librarians, so I used the US data instead. Job growth is average, job openings are below average, not ideal, but certainly could be worse as well. The job of librarian interests me because when I was a page working at a library, it was genuinely one of the probably the most relaxing and fun jobs I've ever had. I love organizing things. I think I mentioned that earlier. My brain is kind of wired to enjoy most job tasks required to work in a library. I catalog my own personal items. In my garage attic, I have a spreadsheet for my garage attic that lists where everything I store in there is. So, 5 years from now, if I need to know where it is, I can just look at my spreadsheet and I know where it is. It's just kind of how my brain works. I chose this awesome picture of a library card catalog, by the way, because I am just old enough to remember card catalogs in public libraries when I was a kid. Pierce County, I'm sure by the early 2000s, but probably even by the late 90s, they had switched to computers. But when I was a kid growing up in Graham, that Graham library had a card catalog, and I'm probably part of the last generation that grew up learning how to use a card catalog. Another reason librarians interest me is because, much like teachers, librarians help people, and not just with research or internet access or finding an interesting book to read either. Librarians are havens for those in need. I cannot remember the number of times working in Olympia that I watched or helped library employees take care of the needs of displaced or homeless people. It is one of the last, in my opinion, true bastions of it's a place that's universally positive, a library, and I really appreciate that they exist still, and hopefully they will continue existing for a long time. Now, looking at the cost of living in Tacoma, wow, it's expensive at the moment. Not surprising to me or anyone else who has lived in the area for a while, but still a bit startling to see the breakdown. Some of this is not going to specifically apply to me actually, because when it comes to housing, my wife and I, my family are very lucky. We're living with my mom at the moment, and my wife's family has property and a home in Sumner that she is eventually going to inherit as well. So long term, we do not have to worry about housing in the way that most people do. We're very lucky. When it comes to childcare, we decided that my wife, she's going to stay home and raise the kids until they're in elementary, and then she's likely going to pursue a career in ECE afterwards. She already has an ECE Associate's Early Childhood Education, and she has years of experience teaching pre-K. So that part of the budget really doesn't apply to us either. But even though, even taking those out, the monthly budget still comes to around 5,700 monthly, and an average starting teacher monthly salary is 63.95 monthly, and that is before taking taxes out. So realistically, we are looking at a break even at best case scenario early on in my career, which I expected and I think I'm prepared for, but I guess we will find out in the future, huh? Um, In this last section, I'm going to take a look at myself and answer the questions: what changed this quarter, what has affirmed my career path, and what was my dream job as a child. Then I'm going to attempt to wrap up everything with a summation of my now kind of long portfolio. A lot of things have changed for me this quarter. I have really brought into focus exactly what my long-term goals are. When I signed up for winter 2024, my initial thought process was to go for a math education DTA because I thought it made the most sense if I wanted to be a math teacher. However, after meeting with my advisor, Professor Lal, who I cannot say enough awesome things about, he is an amazing advisor, I realized that elementary education was actually the most logical course of action if my goal is to be a middle school math teacher. I can always pursue credentials in teaching high school math and science after I obtain a degree, but the most efficient route to becoming a teacher is going to be through the elementary education degree program. I've determined my future transfer university is CWU Pierce County, and I got to give you a personal shout out real quick because you were the first person that mentioned CWU Pierce County to me, and I started looking into it because of that note you sent me early on in College Success, so thank you for that. I visited their campus and spoke with a couple of people and really enjoyed the feeling and the vibe, so to speak. Their elementary education program seems like it's really going to fit my needs, and I am excited to pursue a degree and know where I want to pursue it. On a personal level, I feel incredibly good about what I'm doing right now. I feel proud of myself for taking the steps I have taken to enroll in college and start a new career. And yeah, I have a lot of self-esteem right now. Did anything this quarter affirm my career path? A few things affirmed my career path this quarter. Taking pre-calculus and having very little problem with it, despite taking it online, has made me feel quite confident that I'm going to be able to teach math to children at a highly competent level. Uh, it had been many years since I've taken a math class, so even though I thought I was going to do well, there was still that little bit of self-doubt I had going into the quarter that dissipated once I realized I was going to complete pre-calculus relatively easily. Taking Intro to Education and being deeply interested in the course content affirmed my career path as well. The psychological and philosophical aspects of being a teacher are a lot more complex than I think I realized, and even though it is a bit daunting, I have kind of reframed one of my goals from simply teaching children math to helping children feel seen and heard while also teaching math. Pretty much everyone I have talked to at Pierce or CWU has said the same thing when I mentioned I want to be a math teacher. Schools in the area are struggling to find math teachers. Knowing the field I'm interested in also needs people to be interested in the field is a good feeling. It makes me feel quite confident that I will find a job relatively quickly after receiving my credentials. The last thing, and this is to me by far the most important thing, is being able to spend time with my son. Having job hours that will be similar to my son's and soon to be second son's school hours. It's very important to me. And as far as time off, there's no other job, at least I can think of, where for the most part you have the same holidays off as your school age kids, and that really matters to me. What was my dream job as a child? Well, I had a few dream jobs, as you can see. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. I was, and I still am totally amazed by space. I just watched the Odysseus landing the other day. The planets, the solar system, space travel, all of that. I watched, still do, but I watched Star Trek all the time as a kid. The idea of an astronaut traveling through space is a lot different, of course, from the reality of the job. And kids a lot of kids want to be astronauts. It wasn't something I ever really seriously considered. I was just being a kid. When I was a teenager, specifically when I was in 10th grade, I had an amazing honors English and honors history teacher named Jim Swatsky. And he was definitely in that mold of the Robin Williams Dead Poet Society teacher, and he really turned me on to the idea of philosophy and philosophers in general. And I remember he let me borrow books, his own personal books about a lot of philosophers, Kant and Kierkegaard and Heidegger and Sartre. So for a year or two there, I thought, I'm going to be a philosopher. Now, what that entails, I couldn't tell you. I think I eventually realized this as well, that unless I want to teach philosophy at a school, my prospects for being a philosopher are not especially great. I still love the field of philosophy, of course, but I think I grew out of that phase kind of quickly of wanting to be a philosopher for a career. And then when I was a senior in high school, I read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and then I read Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72. And for a couple of years there, I wanted to be Hunter S. Thompson, or the idea of him at least. I think the idea of Hunter S. Thompson, of the gonzo journalist, is quite liberating to a certain young male personality type. I ended up aging out of this when, I read more and more of his works and I aged and I realized, maybe being an intelligent yet self-destructive drug addict and alcoholic is not the best idea for my own lifestyle. I still love Hunter S. Thompson, do not get me wrong, but, as an adult now, I see him as more of who he probably was, which is an incredibly smart yet flawed person. Rather than that hero worship I had of him as a teenager. When I was in my late teens and early 20s, I seriously wanted to be a film critic. Now, this is a job I actually seriously wanted. I can honestly say I was really good at it as well. I was a film critic for the Pioneer, amongst other things I did for the Pioneer, but I was the primary film critic there in 2007, 2008, around that time. And I won first and second place in the same year at the WCCJA Awards. I think they're called something else now, but it's a regional community college journalism awards for my reviews of No Country for Old Men and Gone Baby Gone. I grew up reading Roger Ebert reviews. I watched At the Movies all the time. If there is a Roger Ebert book I do not own, I am unaware of it. I emulated a lot of his writing style on my own writing. In fact, fun little note here. The reason I chose this particular Hunter S. Thompson photo is not because of him, but in fact because if you look in the background, you can see the book Pauline Kael's 5001 Nights at the Movies, which is one of the all-time great film critic books. And through Ebert, I learned about Pauline Kael and the New Yorker, and I learned about Andrew Sarris writing for the New York Times, and I learned about their long-standing feud over the ideas of what a film should be, And Pauline Kael is, other than Ebert, by far my favorite film critic. I love her writing so much. And in hindsight, I would say my biggest regret in life is not further pursuing journalism and specifically writing about movies. The easy answer as to why is I was younger, I dropped out of college, I moved to Bellingham, didn't have an outlet for writing about movies anymore. That's the easy, not really thinking about it answer. But the honest, self-reflective answer is I was young and scared of personal failure, and I didn't know how to pursue something that I was good at, but there were no obvious or clear pathways to making money off of it, so I just kind of gave up on it. That's just the reality. That's the honest answer. Now, I would say the common threads between all of these jobs and my current career strengths, or my current career choice, go back to my VIA strengths of curiosity and love of learning. Whether or not you are an astronaut, philosopher, film critic, or math teacher, you need to have a desire to constantly be learning, to gain new knowledge, and to be involved in continuing education. Now, I realize my portfolio summation is a half hour now, so I'm going to quickly wrap up. Sorry for the long portfolio. Who am I? I'm a father first. I'm always going to be a father first. Everything else is ultimately going to be second to that. I'm a lifelong learner. I think that when you add up all of my strengths, values, and soft skills, if you had to define me in a word or phrase, lifelong learner is the accurate one that describes me. Who will I be? Well, I will be a Central Washington University Pierce County student first. I'm going to transfer there. I'm going to get my elementary education degree. I'm going to obtain my teaching certificate, and then ultimately I'm going to be a middle school math teacher. That's the long-term plan. That's the goal. That's what I intend to achieve. Thank you very much, Professor Brewer, for watching my now drawn out PowerPoint presentation. I can't wait to hear your feedback. And specifically, I would love to know how you think I can improve on my PowerPoint presentations. Obviously, I should probably whittle it down a little bit in the future, time frame wise, but any sort of other feedback would be wonderful as well. Have a great day, and thank you so much.